Joel Cavell, who's a philosopher. He's written 10 books. He's written a lot about eco-socialism, which is a profound subject which affects all of us, and we should be aware of that. Joel is a professor, he's a writer, he's an activist, and just a great human being.
You know, I'm not the world's biggest civil disobedience person, but I've done it about a dozen times, and they've all been very memorable and very important parts of my life, signposts. I feel that you don't ever want to get soft and complacent. I think every one of us should spend some time in jail and be acquainted firsthand with the injustice system, or whatever they want to call it, and know that system is necessary in a society built on inequality and domination, you know, and the gathering of wealth above all. So, you know, that system spreads out its tentacles over the whole of society, and it's really very important for people to get over their fear of it. And one of the best ways of doing that is to just let yourself be arrested. I mean, you know, not foolishly, but to make a statement, to make a statement for change, to say no to business as usual. And you know, the most common adage in the Bible that some people said is "Be not afraid." It appears all over the Bible, Old and New Testaments alike, about hundreds of times, really. And so there must be something to that, because the Bible is the best-selling book in human history, and that's a very important, you know, lesson. People go through life afraid, and in our kind of society, capitalist society, fear is inculcated in every which way. Fear of failure, fear of humiliation, mostly fear of debt, you know, and we have no social safety net, we have no basic sense of community, and we are prey to all of our fears. And it's very important for people to take action against that, which you can't do on your own. If you do it collectively and make those statements which reflect where you are in the world and what you've done and the differences you can make and the witness you can bear and so on. So I by no means a professional soldier, to say the least. I was never even picked up a gun. I was a physician in the 60s, but I did 2 years in the military during Vietnam era and contributed to that war effort, and it made me feel very angry and very guilty that I had contributed to something that I was learning was, you know, one of the supreme crimes of history, and the invasion of a foreign country, the laying waste to that country, the killing of 3 million people and the like. So that set me on a path of being a militant activist. It's a long path. It'll take too long to go over it, but I just think that it's important to step forward every now and then. I work with these folks. I am a veteran for peace. Tarek, who's clearly our leader, although I don't want to emphasize that because he's not an authoritarian character in any sense of the word. He brought this forward and these ideas. I've been arrested about 4 or 5 times with excuse me, with them over the last 4 or 5 years, and so we did it a year ago because it was the anniversary of the invasion of Afghanistan. And as I said in my brief remarks, it would take endless amount of time to go over this. And the U.S. is a machine that is just built for militarism and domination, and that's there's no way to get around that kind of monstrosity. But you have to keep challenging it here, there, everywhere, because what is gradually happening in our society is that there's a substantial turn of opinion away from it. That I think we're at a society that we live in, which is very, very peculiar, very, very complex. They're now beginning to say no to some of this. A lot of it has to do with the miseries that the middle classes, I don't like that phrase, but you know, the people in the middle of the income gap, income system, and the ones below that are suffering the the terrible statistics about inequality and the like, the sense of hopelessness, that their children are not going to have better lives than themselves, a sense of decline, and always shadowed over by these vicious wars that the system is incapable of stopping. It needs it. It's very important to bear in mind that what the Secretary of State and the President say is that, we're here because we're an exceptional country, we have to preserve the peace and the like. This is, of course, one of the great lies of history. There's nothing at all close to the case. The United States is actually a maker of warfare, a maker of enmity. It feeds off of having enemies. It needs enemies to legitimate itself, and it can't breathe without them. It goes back to the days of the Roman Empire. It's the same thing. Rome had to always find some kind of enemy and send the legions out to knock them off, And it's the same thing here. My goodness. Just the other day, the goddamn U.S. invaded Libya and Somalia in the same day. I mean, it's like amazing. And saying, we were fighting Al Qaeda, but they're not fighting Al Qaeda. They're making Al Qaeda. This is how they generate. This is how they make their enemy, so that people can come and plague us and be stereotyped as the terrorist. And so we have to therefore mobilize our society against the threat of terrorism, which is strictly created by the military establishment because it needs a fresh stream of enemies to reproduce itself. Anyhow, it's a horror, but there are signs of hope. There really are. A lot of things are changing. Our country is by no means the behemoth that it once was. It's lost a lot of confidence. The balance of power in the world is shifting. And I think there's a lot of opening. A lot of people are very, very distressed, very, very angry, and they appreciate standing forth and standing up. So these kinds of events are small here, but they're going on all over the place, and everybody has to take their stand where they are and communicate their common goodwill to all of the underlings of this society and this militaristic monster.
Yeah, you touched upon it a little bit. Maybe one last thing, advice for people, even with your situation, with your story of getting involved. What's the one thing that people could learn from you or anything like that to get involved with civil disobedience and start getting involved in activism? Maybe certain things you could that you learned.
I don't want to come across like this is therapeutic or something, because it's not. There's a lot of real suffering, but I don't think this is for me. But I do think it has some generality. I don't think that a life is adequately lived unless it's lived in a struggle against that which will destroy the world and mutilate human beings, and in this case also destroy our natural, endowments, the terrible threat we have to the atmosphere and, the water and all these subjects. That's what I spend the most of my time on, actually, these days. And in any event, as an existential, what I feel, I get sad and I get angry, but I don't get depressed because I know I'm always out there fighting. I'm trying to reach younger people. It gives life a sense of meaning and purpose, and that's what we need most of all in our life. Meaning and purpose, not something that's just defined for us by the entertainment industry, the consumerist society that we live in, and which is necessary to reproduce the capitalist system. So if you stand up against that in any which way, I do believe you're leading a life of dignity and of self-direction, and more deeply of communication and universal conduct. You're reaching people, and you feel at one with the universe and with the rest of humanity. This is what I feel has been the happiest thing about my life. I mean, I'm happy with my family and a lot of personal things as well. But I mean, this is as a citizen of the earth at this time in history, this is what I recommend to people. It's just really the better way to live. Whether you win or not is not the immediate issue. So you don't really know what winning means in this sense, You can be little isolated groups somewheres, but it has an effect. It triggers others. These forces build. They move on their own, momentum at times. And to me, that's all to the good, as long as it's kept nonviolent.
Don't arrest our politicians to send our young men thinking, this is so wrong. This is so wrong. And after that, seeing kind of how the media was portraying Iraq and linking it to 9/11, and I was just like, something's very wrong, and it crosses party lines, and it's not just Bush, it's the whole establishment.